Hey everyone, welcome to the Purpose Matrix. We're really excited for today's guest, Mike Duffy. We cover a lot of ground on a lot of different topics. First of all, I appreciate Mike's transparency on his story, kind of the challenges he had, as he said, identifying the hole that he had inside and how he came out of that. And really on this journey, he's been on this journey of self-discovery for 9 years. You know, we talk about our biggest critic, which is often ourself and self-talk. Mike talks us through 4 key elements to be flourishing. So you're not going to want to miss that part of the discussion, and really trying to identify where you fit on that and how they fit together. And then we get into AI and really how Mike uses it as a personal advisor for himself. But the big thing I'd say is there's wisdom that Mike, his business is Venn Wisdom, and he brings wisdom throughout the show, throughout this discussion. So we really appreciate you listening in. Mike, how are you doing today?
I am excellent. How about yourself, Phil?
I'm doing great. And I had a conversation on Mike's podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we just had a great deep conversation, really. So I'm really looking forward for Mike to bring value to our listeners, to you today, because he has a lot of wisdom. Mike has a really interesting story. He's going to tell us about that, but he's the founder and coach of Venn Wisdom. And really his focus just to help men live lives of deep connection. And he's got a neat story. He's got a assessment framework that I went through and did. We're going to talk about that. But before we get into all that, Mike, tell me a little bit about your background and how did you get to where you are today?
Sure. So started off, I was an Army officer. That's how I paid for college. Wonderful way to start a career and start off as a leader. As a second lieutenant, you know nothing and everyone knows it. And therefore you have to lead with a lot of respect, pushing respect down to get respect up. It was a wonderful way to learn servant leadership. From there, I did a long corporate career and was a corporate Swiss Army knife, as I like to call it. I worked in every business function as a change agent, identifying whether it was sales or marketing or strategy or operations, getting to know the function and saying, what's at the center of this? What are the leverage points that are going to make the biggest difference? And I would do a lot of research and a lot of conversations, find those leverage points, and then I would drive them through the organization. And it was high risk, high reward. And there were reasons why I was pursuing that. It was an unusual career, and we'd have to make up my job title. And I had bosses that we would just say, okay, you're VP of X or Y or Z, and it would allow me to go do my thing. So it was an unconventional path. But what I found, particularly towards the end, I was taking bigger and bigger swings at the plate. And my friends would say, you're crazy. You're taking on so much risk to try and change the organization. And I didn't know any other path but to just keep going bigger and bigger. And then it finally hit me that it didn't matter how big it was, it still wasn't going to be enough. I had this realization that I could be the president of the universe, and it still wasn't going to be enough to fill the hole inside.
So we'll get to that. Before I do, you talked about the Swiss Army knife and all these different roles and really different types of roles, right? Very different types of organizations and functions. Why do you think you were able to be successful in so many different leadership functions?
That's a great question. I would say really my intuitive methodology, which was I'm super curious. I would look at a problem. I would go and comb what are all the external best practices? What is the world saying of what direction we should go? I would then take those insights into the organization and say, hey, here's an idea, and here's what the external world's saying about it. Here are the best practices. Would that work here? And so I would triangulate what was working in the outside world, what's going to work here, and make sure it was a fit for the organization. So I just think I would take people on a path of this is the possibility, how does it fit this organization? And I would co-opt them into the vision so that they really understood it and felt that they contributed to it.
I think what I heard, if I summarize it, and this maybe isn't your exact words, but first of all, I think you're being very humble. I think leadership and communication and those things, just the interpersonal skills, were probably a very big part of your success, I'm sure. But your approach was a combination of, I think, seek first to understand, probably understand the group and the possibilities, but then also when you're curious, when you're seeking out like what could be possible, you're also helping create this vision amongst your team of what is possible. That's probably getting them excited too. So an element, I think, of leadership. So very, very interesting because I was in the corporate world. I didn't have a lot of different functions like in different groups, but I was in a group that interacted with all those different functions. So I got familiar with them, but not to the depth of knowledge that I'm sure you did. But I think I can understand and relate a little bit what you were doing. And as you said, you could have been the president of the universe and there was still a hole inside. You were still searching for something. So when did you start to feel that? And then what did the coming months, years, whatever that looked like, what did that look like from when you kind of identified the hole inside?
Absolutely. I'd say one really memorable moment was I was on the corporate jet, which is a super fun way to fly around the world and did a lot of travel. But one time I was on the jet and I looked around at all these executives and I said, what a nest of vipers this is. Every single person was super smart, super ambitious, sharp elbows. And I said, I do not belong here. And I wish that I would have had the strength and the clarity to really say, okay, I'm going to make a rational decision. I'm going to make a decision that changed my trend line. Instead, I just kept climbing. That was a moment of awareness that I just kept going. And quite honestly, it wasn't until addiction caught up with me, which I fell into to compensate for being in an environment that didn't suit me. Over time, drugs and alcohol were something that took the edge off, and then it became something I couldn't live without. And when that epiphany hit me, when it became clear that I was in the grasp of drugs and alcohol, then it became really clear that I had to solve for it. So I went to rehab, and from there had just in the last 9 years have just been an extraordinary path of self-discovery, of research, of growth. One of the things that you'll hear in 12-step rooms that's really seems strange is I can say, thank God I'm an alcoholic. Why would anyone ever say that? It's because it's led me, as it has people that really embrace recovery, to a much different me. Really forced me to strip away a lot of what was running me, see the patterns. It also started to really teach me how important vulnerability, connection were, getting to the really deeper levels with people. I like one of my favorite philosophers. I'm an ancient wisdom guy. One of my favorite philosophers is a guy named Epicurus. And he was a Greek philosopher about 300 BC. And he had 4 elements of happiness that he taught. Number 1 was just enough sustenance, shelter, etc., not too much, but you need a roof over your head. Number 2, freedom from oppression. If you have a boss or a government or something that's got a boot on your neck, it's tough to feel happy. But once those 2 things are met, kind of the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, where he went next is the punchline. It's about friendship, and it's about going deep with friends on life's most important questions, going below the surface, getting to the good stuff, and helping people with support and correction. The last 9 years have just been an incredible journey for me in that vein. How do we talk about what's really important? How do we really support each other at a deeper level? And in the corporate world, that was tough to get to. There were a lot of masks.
Yeah. So we're going to come back to that. But 12 steps, thank God I'm an alcoholic. And what I heard you say is like, there's an approach to that is let go of your past, but also actually not let go, look at that as blessings. And I just wonder how many people have issues or challenges that they've faced, right? For you, it was alcoholism, but it can be a lot of different things that we're not either letting go of or looking back at our quote failures as failures versus those are blessings because they made me who I am today, right? So how much of that how much of that is a fundamental mindset that you think is so important for anyone, regardless of, what those past challenges have been?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Look, 9 out of 10 people are running around with a pretty active inner critic. People are suffering. And, there's big S suffering and there's little s suffering. Big S suffering, you lose a parent, you have a kid that's sick, you lose a job, those are episodic types of suffering we go through. But little s suffering, am I enough? Do people see me? Am I good enough? Those sorts of questions, they stay with us throughout our
Yeah.
lives. And it's like we're fish in water. We don't talk about those things, and yet we all feel them. Socrates had a beautiful line. He said, "Be nicer to everyone you meet. Everyone is fighting some type of battle."
Yeah.
And more often than not, that battle is internal. And I would say one of the greatest hacks is to stop shouldering that burden all by yourself, and to find, whether it's a friend or a coach or a therapist, get it out. Get your feelings out there. There's a great study that said the number one driver of satisfaction in relationships is being seen. Who are you seen by? And when I ask that question of people, how many in your life do you feel fully seen by? A lot of people look at me and with a lot of sadness, they just shake their head. They're not seen. And so you just end up, and one last point, I'm just convinced that the mind does a really crappy job of making us happy. That's not its primary job. Its primary job is to help us to survive. It's not to make us happy. And we can get trapped in our minds, in our own little bubble. And one of the greatest hacks to get out of that is close friendships, close relationships, to get what's going on in your mind out there, to get the fears out there, to get the inner critic out there. And what you'll hear is calibration. People providing you the sort of feedback or insight to balance yourself that I know personally I have a hard time finding within.
So first of all, I was going to go when your connection to self-talk, and then instead of just talking with yourself, talking with others and having a real conversation and in-depth conversations. But before I jump to the discussions with others, I was just listening to a podcast, I think yesterday, where they talked about if you wanted to hang out with somebody, and let's say you just went on a walk with somebody, and on the walk, every 3 minutes or every 5 minutes, they started saying, "Hey, you're not good enough," or "Hey, you're probably not going to do that well," or "Hey, you're not going to, you don't deserve what you have," or whatever it might be, right? Would you hang out with that person? You wouldn't. You would not take that from somebody else, but we all take it from ourselves all the time, right? We all are talking to that person is you. You talk to yourself more than anyone else will ever talk to you. That is impossible to not have that be the case. You talk. So what is the self-talk, right? Guys, there's a lot of great quotes around this. And my quotes are probably like 10, 20, maybe 30 years old. Mike, your quotes are, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years old because of your ancient wisdom. I wanted to ask you a question though on, depth of relationships with others and feelings. I also had a discussion. How do we balance, is it, if it's with ourselves, if it's with others, how do we balance, hey, we want to talk about our feelings, with you're soft. You know what I mean? Like, that's soft, like just toughen up. Like, right? There's this, like, help me understand how I should think about, like, how I should just reconcile those two different things.
You're soft when you go to emotions. I hear that. That's how we've been culturally conditioned, right? Don't come with a problem without a solution. Handle your crap. Absolutely. Yet, when you step on the other side of it, there's so much power in mastery of feelings. Carl Jung, in his work, he talked about for men the anima, which is our set of feminine characteristics: listening, dealing with emotions, supporting others, etc. And he said, in order to be a fully fledged man, you need to fully develop those characteristics in order to be your full self. That doesn't mean that you sit there and that's your primary identity. It means you have the capabilities, you have the skills to go there when you need to. So, not suggesting that, you're running around constantly talking about your feelings, constantly emoting. You pick your spots, you pick your relationship. But I think it's such an important turn to talk about this as mastery. This is about, we all have an inner masculine and an inner feminine, whether you're a man or a woman, elevating those skills, getting the full breadth of those, bringing those online. To me, that's really exciting.
Yeah. And what I like, the other thing, that the word that comes to mind is we're not saying because you want to talk about these things, you're skirting or getting rid of ownership and you're not taking responsibility. Actually, you're saying, no, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to take ownership of my life and how I talk to myself, how I'm understood. I'm going to take ownership of that. So I think if we're not digging in and trying to understand ourselves better. And by the way, I think a great way to do that is talking with others, because the reality is when you do that, you're not only helping yourself, you're helping the other person too, because you're like, even this conversation, you're very open, you're very transparent, because you've clearly had these conversations with other people before. So you're comfortable talking about these things because you've conditioned yourself to talk about these things. And because of that, you feel better about yourself, right? And in general, you have a better mindset because you've talked about these things. So I appreciate your transparency around it. I want to kind of go to, as part of Mike's coaching program, and I went through and I did this assessment, and we talked about it, but you have an assessment you do, and it assesses people's level of what their profile is, and it's called the flourishing profile. And the 4 elements of it are achievement, fulfillment, connection, and barriers. Tell me why these 4 items are important. So you have a set of questions that then give people a score around these 4 elements, but why these 4 elements? Why are these important to understand?
Each of them. So I went for a number of years through the great wisdom traditions, from Confucianism to Buddhism to Islam to Christianity, et cetera, and really did it as an analytic project. And those 4 elements came up from that work, from what the wisdom traditions all agree on. The first one, achievement. The Islamic poet Rumi said, the desire to work has been put into every human heart. Even the Buddha talked about, the Buddha we tend to think about as peace and serenity and meditation. Buddha kicked ass. The Buddha, once he had his epiphany, traveled for 30 years, ignited a movement, ordained thousands of monks, blew up the caste system in India. He made it happen. So achievement is really hardwired into us as men. It's critically important that we be a provider. That's so important internally and in our love relationships with women. So I think most of us get achievement. It's critically important to bring our gifts to the world. It can be tough to figure out what those gifts are. And it can be tough to figure out what's my purpose and what's my purpose in this season of life. So there's lots we could talk about in achievement.
I want to ask, because other people talk about this on the show. So I want to stay there on achievement and the importance of it, the desire to work, a provider. We're hardwired to be these things, as you said. What do you think about the term lifestyle businesses? I'm sure you've heard that before, where, okay, our sole purpose of our business is to support our lifestyle. Does that resonate with you, or do you disagree with that? How do you feel?
Boy, my instinctive reaction is God bless them. Whatever path makes sense for people, that's going to light them up. Like, my dad was a lifestyle entrepreneur, only worked enough to sail his ass off and go on these amazing camping trips He took us from Southern California, drove to Alaska and back, drove around the circumference of the United States, these massive sort of experiences. And he only worked enough to make that happen. That's what lit him up. And I can see that. If that's you, then really embrace that. But I'm more influenced by what am I here to do, and in this lifetime. And there's a beautiful line from the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu wisdom tradition. It said, "Selfless service is the supreme goal of life." And I was recently heard, and I'm going to paraphrase it from the Bible. It was also, you've been given a gift. The secret is how you give that gift away. So I'm really turned on by service. I think this is a pull that happens as you get older in life. I'm in my 50s. I noticed that with my clients. They'll have an initial phase where they're in a career and they're really building wealth, building position, building security. But at a certain point, that call to service kind of starts knocking on the door, maybe overtly, maybe under the covers. But how do I serve? And one of the most beautiful ways I see this come up is really successful people tend to want to give it away. They're like, I want to write a book. I want a mentor. It's this beautiful aspect of humanity that once we get it, we want to give it away and serve others. That's what really turns me on.
And I love selfless service is the supreme goal of life. I love that. In the Bible, to whom much is given, much is required. And I just think, even if, back to the lifestyle thing, I think having clarity on what lights you up and what the deepest sense of that is. And maybe that's a season of life thing where you think it's something, but then it's maybe temporary, but it leads you to the next thing. I think that's okay too. But I think trying to understand what really gets you going, gives you energy, lean into that and do more of that. Even if you don't have, purpose is a big word. Obviously we talk about that, but even if you don't have clarity of that, just pay attention to what really gives you energy and really what lights you up. So I love that. I love that framework and thought process on clarifying, I think, what you mean by achievement. I think that's important. So the other one, the next one, so fulfillment. How do we get fulfillment?
So, and this really hits my story. I was all about achievement. And what does fulfillment mean? In my world, fulfillment means gratitude, satisfaction, pride, just a sense of accomplishment of where you're at. That doesn't always come with achievement. It didn't for me. It was just achieve more. Fulfillment is, and it's what's fascinating to me, is how do you keep high achievement in order to make things happen in the world to serve others? And simultaneously, how do you step back a little bit and say, let me appreciate this. Let me really savor this. And there's a danger if you go too far into fulfillment. This happened to me. After years of going through these ancient wisdom traditions, I zenned out. I was like, wow, it is about just being and being in the moment. And I lost that motor around achievement. So to me, those are two really interesting throttles. But a really practical way of bringing fulfillment home is something from Ben Hardy, The Gap and the Gain. Have you read that one?
Absolutely.
And, that's super popular for entrepreneurs for a good reason. It's a very simple construct that I constantly live in the gap. I'm here and I want to get here. It's the hedonic treadmill. It's the I will be happy when syndrome. We all know it's a fallacy, and yet we all live it and we all stay in it. That's whatever way our brains are a little perverse. The gain is stop. Where was I and where am I now? And really savoring that and taking credit for that and living in that. So there's a lot of tools to bring online to not just achieve, but to really feel fulfilled and really feel good about what you've done.
And it's not just about what you do. There's also habits, hacks, as you said a couple times, that you can work on yourself to bring more fulfillment as well. And definitely what I heard as well is that these things, if you just pursue achievement at something that you're not passionate about or isn't fulfilling, then you're not going to have fulfillment, but you have achievement. But there's also a balance where you don't want to just focus on all fulfillment without achievement. So, and then the gap and the gain, I think that's a great reference here. And it's really, I think, looking at, so the gap, looking in the past, the gap is looking forward where I think I should be, but I'm not there yet. The gain, looking back, look at the progress I've made. And when we're looking at the gain, it goes back to your earliest story, which is, let's look at failures and things that have happened to me as blessings and lessons that have helped me become who I am, not just bad things in the past, but no, they made me better. Those things happen for a reason. So achievement, fulfillment, connection, and barriers. Take us through these.
So, and these form a formula. On the top, the numerator is achievement times fulfillment times connection. The way that formula works, like me, I was all achievement, I was almost zero on fulfillment, and my connection was low. So I had a pretty low overall low score. So I really dialed the fulfillment up. A really critical part of that was also simultaneously bringing connection up. And what I mean by that is there's some things we can do in personal development just by ourselves. No one needs to know about them. We just do that work internally. But there's a lot of things that we have to be in relation to others in order to develop. We need another human being in our orbit in order to work on some things. So connection, there's, ancient to modern, there's so much support for how important this is. Ancient source, I already talked about Epicurus. Modern, Harvard's has a study running on human happiness. It's the longest running study on happiness in the world. It's been going on 75 years. The number one driver of happiness throughout these guys they follow for 75 years was relationships, was getting deeper. So there's, deep connection, and you don't need a raft of people that you can really go deep with. You don't need 7-8 people. You need a couple. That you really can be seen by. And we're under threat here. Have you heard of the friendship recession?
I have not heard of the friendship recession, no.
It's a thing. You can Google it. Over the last 30 years, friendships have deteriorated markedly in society, particularly for men. It's hit women as well, but more so men. The percentage of men that have a single friend has declined significantly, or the number of friends has declined. It's really pretty shocking. And so we have these societal forces that are atomizing us, that are making us more insular, that we have less interaction. If you think about it, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you had all these, the Elks Club, the Moose Club, all these service organizations. We had workplaces that we actually went to, and you develop relationships. There was this, people tended to more stay in their hometown. Now we're kind of independent agents out there just, getting buffeted by the world. And so I feel so strongly that we have to push back against these forces that are causing us to separate from each other. You have to understand that the case for connection is incredibly strong when it comes to happiness. Pick your poison, ancient or modern. It's very convincing. But we have to take action in order to build the connections, nourish the connections, and go deep. It's vitally important.
And I think so. I'll just the purpose matrix and the 5 keys to success. Clarifying your purpose. So purpose, P. Educate yourself. Associate with others is the third one. And I think, as you said it, if you clarify what you want to do, what you think you're meant to do, and you just educate yourself all day long, but you don't connect with others, network with others, you're not going to be as fulfilled. I don't think you're going to hit the other markers here as you would if you have those people that you can go to. And what I tell people is, if you feel like you have, maybe you have friends, but they're surface level, I would say, or the conversations you're having are very surface level. Let's say they're a level 2 on a scale of 1 to 10. go to level 3, try to have the next level of depth of conversation, and then go to level 4. And then like, don't go from 2 to 10 the first time. Like, don't, work through that and identify who you think, as you try to progress in the depth of your conversations, identify who's willing to go there and who's not, and keep exploring that. Or even just ask people, hey, I'm looking for someone that I can really open up to and even hold me accountable to my family, my faith, my work, whatever it might be, right? You can have these connections to support, I think, different areas of life as well. So I think being very disciplined about who are your connections, and do I have a connection in the different areas of life that are important to me? And if you do, you're going to have, I think you would score better on Mike's assessment. So, and then the other thing I would say is that I think all of this, so achievement, fulfillment, and connection are you said the numerator, but so the more we can have these things together, I think, I think they build on each other, right, Mike? Don't these, like, if you have better connection, aren't you going to have more achievement and fulfillment? Is that true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. They have relationships between them. Absolutely.
And then is the denominator barriers? Is that how I should understand this?
It is. So let's say you're focused on achievement or fulfillment or connection, but something is just stopping you from getting there. And we can learn things. We can say, oh, I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to go to the internet. I'm going to learn something, or I take a course or whatever. We can build our skills in any of those dimensions. But sometimes even when we keep working, we're not advancing, and we don't know why. And to me, so I know I should do it. I know how to do it, but I'm not pulling the trigger and I'm not doing it, whether that's in our achievement world, our fulfillment world, or our connection world. To me, that's really interesting. And I get really curious about that. Typically, that's why there's a barrier. There's something deep within us that's preventing us from moving forward, from fulfilling our potential. Things like self-worth, imposter syndrome, scarcity, all of these. There's an array of a lot of things I test for that are under the hood, that are undermining us, that are tough for us to see. And we don't need to go running after those and say, okay, tell me what all my barriers are. To me, it's more reactive. If I'm not making progress, despite something that's really important to me, and I don't know why, then it's an invitation to go deeper and say, what's running me? What's under the hood? That's, yeah. And if the barriers are significant, you can be doing everything on the numerator to push, and you're not going to make progress until you go after what's underneath. And for many, many people, that's trauma. And, and it's not just, the punchline is it's not just capital T trauma, little t traumas count that we all pick up, that imprint on us that there's something wrong with us. You talked about that in the beginning of the call, that voice that says every 3 to 5 minutes, you're wrong, or you're corrupt, or whatever. That can be so debilitating that sometimes you need to go after that. You need to make a focused effort to go after those barriers and solve for them.
Well, and I think all of this comes down to just having the courage to understand yourself better, to have the deeper conversations. It just, we just like courage, the term courage, I think the Latin origin is strength of heart. And it's really getting inside and understanding yourself, and then trying to figure out, have the courage to figure out who you really are inside. Don't have that hole inside, as you said early on. Have the courage to go do all the things you've talked about to pursue that and figure that out. So I like that a lot. I want to just have you talk me through, how are you using this today? So fast forward today, you've been on this, I think you said 9-year journey of self-discovery, and now you're coaching people and connecting. What are you up to?
Let me answer that. But first, I want to come back to what you just said. Courage being strength of heart, right?
Correct.
I love that. I think that humans have an essential challenge. We all do, that we live too much in our minds. We talked about in the beginning, our mind is an amazing instrument, but it's also, I look at my mind as a really powerful, sharp instrument that can do great things, but also can cause internal injury, right?
Yep.
What do you do about that? I've become really fascinated with the heart, with courage of the heart, with listening to the heart, and a
Yeah.
sequence that I think is pivotal of starting with the heart and then going to the mind.
Yep.
And the way I do that is I really, and this is a trainable skill. I ask myself, what does my heart want right now? What should I say here? What should I do here? And I'll say, okay, heart, what's the answer? And
Yeah.
when I ask my heart directly, I find that the answers are very clear, they're concise, they're quick. Boom, they're there, and then I can say, okay, mind. Now, what do you do with these things? What do you do with these
Yeah.
ideas, these actions, these things to say? The alternative is you go to your mind and you ask a question. The mind questions the question. The mind starts arm wrestling it. So I think it's a real pivotal opportunity for most of us, particularly people that are super intelligent that live in their minds, to really develop the heart as an energetic organ to make decisions, to guide our lives, to orient us on what's most important. And then there's a great line from Ram Dass that David Osborne, one of the founders of GoBundance, likes to use. He says, the mind is a wonderful servant and a horrible master.
Yeah.
And when I say it to people, they tend to nod their heads and like, yeah. Well, don't miss the punchline. If the mind is not the master, what is the master? The master, it can be the heart. The master can be
Yeah.
higher power. It can be the Lord, but it's not your mind.
Yeah.
Putting
Well, and it reminds me of so Gino Wickman and Rob Dube wrote a book called Shine. So Gino Wickman was the author of Traction, the EOS model, very, very popular author. But he really stepped back and thought through, okay, why am I not getting probably a lot of the things you're talking about, achievement, fulfillment, connection. He was getting achievement, but probably not fulfillment and connection. But their main message is when you have difficult decisions to make, to work to make the decisions out of love and not out of fear. And I think if you're making them out of love, that's from the heart. The mind is a defense vehicle. It was created to protect us. It was created but the mind creates fear for us, and then we're making decisions out of fear. So I think they go hand in hand. And I think I think there's just some really, really smart people that I've heard talk about it, say the same thing in different ways. And I think there's some real truth to that. And when we're making decisions, as you said it, our mind is our master, and we need to recognize that and not allow that to happen. So I appreciate you sharing that. So let's wrap up here over the next few minutes. What are you up to today, Mike? What are you doing?
Well, I'm becoming a cyborg. My head is in AI big time. And I am just really excited by it. First, there are those that say that the AI has the potential to be bigger than the internet. I think they're absolutely right. I think it is a classic failure of human imagination problem. We cannot conceive of where it's going to go. Particularly when it starts to become recursive and the machines start to talk to the machines and we don't know what's going on. It becomes a black box. Holy smokes. The next 5 years are going to be a wild ride.
Yeah.
What do we do about that if we can't predict the future? I passionately believe what we can do is at least stay current with current technology. Get in the game. Start to get your neurons firing of how could this work for my business, for my life. Stay in the flow of AI, or you're more at risk. So that's
I think that's it for business owners. I just had a conversation with one of the ladies that worked for me, just saying, hey, she brought up a different chat bot that we're trying to figure out what even that means. But like, hey, let's try some of this stuff and see, and let's learn what a chat bot is. So you're probably way more advanced than me, but our strategy is each quarter we want to have something around, okay, how are we just progressing a little bit more in AI? Because it's here to stay. It'll evolve, of course, but it's here to stay. And I think the businesses that adopt it are going to be are going to be able to separate themselves from others. So I want to ask you, Mike, if you step back and reflect, just think about what you do, the assessment, the flourishing profile, but really the impact you're having. I mean, through this conversation, you can tell you're a phenomenal coach. You have a ton of Venn wisdom, as you say, and that's real. That's true. Step back and reflect. How does what you do? How does it make you feel?
I love that question. When I'm in service to others, it absolutely lights me up these days. In my Myers-Briggs personality test, I went from a lifetime introvert to an extrovert. That's about energy. And I get energy from digging in with other people, with really being curious, with helping them see what they can't see. And I'll just go back to AI for a second. I appreciate you talking about my diagnostics. I'm really, they're really powerful. They come from ancient wisdom. They're the themes that I saw throughout ancient wisdom boil down into a questionnaire. And when I take those diagnostics and others, and I put them, each of my clients, I develop an AI avatar. I create an instance that I load all the diagnostics in so that AI really knows my client. And then we go to town. It has now become a 3-party coaching engagement. It's me, it's the client, and it's our trusted consultant in AI that really knows the client. And that is just super fun. And I get excited about finding the leverage, like I did in business. What are the leverage points for each individual that are going to make the disproportionate difference for them now? And there's seasons to it. What's important now versus 2 years from now, 6 months from now, it can change. Flow with it. Just stay after, be a strategist. What's most important now? And then I get really excited about evangelizing AI. I feel strongly that everyone needs to step into this. And the last thing I'll say, this is a guilty confession, but I'm not alone. I use AI as my personal advisor. I've replaced my journaling with AI, and I journal in AI. I use it as I'm dating now. And I use it as a dating coach. And I was talking to someone recently, and he said that he's using it the same way. He thinks that his personal development is now 3x faster by using AI.
Wow.
Once it really knows you, once you invest in telling it who you are, and once you pick up a rhythm of how you start to think and how you operate, it can become a very powerful 24/7 companion to help you reflect. From the beginning, we talked about getting outside your mind, getting more perspective, connection. We talked about in human form. A lot of the benefit is give me a perspective I can't see from, by myself. Now we're finding AI can provide that as well, and weaving together the human and the AI perspective to help you is super exciting.
Yeah, I love that, man. Artificial intelligence as our personal advisor, Mike. We're not going to call the episode that, but that is, I honestly, it's also like just an unemotional lens to things. And who are you going to get mad at, right? So I think and there's so much wisdom embedded in that it can pull together. And I can't even talk to it like you can. So, Mike, I appreciate this so much. If you just one closing question, if you think about, you have wisdom because you've sought out wisdom from many, many different resources. So what book, podcast, source, what has had the most profound impact on kind of your mindset?
There's a book that opened up. Well, first of all, there's a wonderful historian by the name of Will Durant. And he was, 20th century. He went through all of human history and wrote these beautiful tomes about history. So he'd seen a lot. And in the end, he said, quote, "Nothing is new except arrangement." And people have always been intelligent, always looking at happiness or purpose or these themes. And it's such an invitation to go deep and to go ancient. And it's had such a profound impact on me. The modern world is so complex. You read an article and you're like, oh, that's the answer. And then the next day you read another article. It's just, what's true? What's real? What's the path? That's why I went to ancient wisdom, was that it's quieter. It's more focused. These things have been preserved for thousands of years. And whenever I see a new psychological study come out, I'll be like, yep, Socrates got that. Yep, Plato got that. I could drop a plumb line. So there's one little book that really opened this door for me. It's called The Consolations of Philosophy by a guy named Alain de Botton. And it's a wonderful, readable little book. I've gifted it so many gosh darn times. And it just takes some of these great thinkers and makes them really accessible, like Nietzsche. Who the heck reads Nietzsche? Botton does a great job of bringing him to life in a way that's compelling, that says, oh, maybe there's something more for me here. So that was huge for me to start to say, this is not dusty old stuff. This is vibrant, living truth that we can bring into our lives.
Man, Mike, that is wisdom right there. And the convolutions of philosophy. Did I say that right?
Consolations of Philosophy.
I can't read my own writing. The Consolations of Philosophy. Mike, this has been amazing. I appreciate it so much. We covered so much ground here from, first of all, just a lot of depth in the story. You heard that from Mike. We appreciate your transparency, from having a hole inside to just really being fulfilled right now, having achievement, fulfillment, just putting the connection, putting the things together that are so important to flourishing, really, as you say. So much appreciation for you, Mike. How can people find out more about you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, vennwisdom.com. That's VENN wisdom.com. And certainly contact me at mike@vennwisdom.com. I've had over 300 people complete my diagnostic. I'm always looking for more data, and I offer some free services on the back of that to help people understand themselves better.
Mike, I appreciate it so much. I appreciate our listeners as well. We appreciate you so much. We hope you're just enjoying the change and kind of the discussions and the rebrand that we have going on. Please help us out by subscribing, whatever platform you're on. We really appreciate that. For the Purpose Matrix, signing off.